Mr. Piotr Kurzin is a geopolitical and international policy professor. Professor is now joining us live from Italy. Professor, thank you very much for your time and welcome to the broadcast. There's a new flashpoint in this war, and if left unchecked, it could be something very disastrous. And I'm talking about what is happening in Lebanon, because all focus is on Iran because of Israel and the United States.
Yeah, I think the epicenter is still Iran. The fallout on Iran is always going to be disproportionately more than on Lebanon. That's not to say that Lebanon doesn't matter. And it matters partially because of its proximity to Europe and the importance of energy security down there, maritime security in the Eastern Mediterranean. And I think that there is a particular reason why we're seeing Lebanon become such a flashpoint now, which is that Iran doesn't have... There's debate around how many rockets and missiles and arsenal Iran has that can fire all the way to Israel and Lebanon. And some people argue that because they're mainly focusing on the Gulf states is because they don't have the rockets capable to reach that far. So they've sought Hezbollah to get involved. And so if they do that, that adds an important dimension to this, which is a ground offensive. Earlier this morning, I read that the IDF were giving evacuation notices to Lebanese living south of the river, in that they are probably going to launch some kind of operation to create a buffer zone, similar to what they did about 15 months ago, as a way to protect northern settlements in Israel. So this will no longer just be a predominantly aerial/maritime campaign, but also a land-based one as well.
Let's talk about the maritime campaign, because it has increased over the past 2 days, because we see the drowning of warships by the United States. And now Iran says that they will permanently close the Strait of Hormuz. What significance will that have on the economy of the world?
Well, this is where the fog of war is very important, because the Iranians have threatened it. And as far as I could tell, a lot of ships have not been going through. But that's mainly because of the company's desire not to risk it, not because the Iranians necessarily control the whole thing. But what impact it could have, as well as it is already having, is that around a fifth of all the oil of the world flows through this tiny maritime area. So Saudi Arabia and Emirati, the UAE, haven't been as affected yet. They are reallocating their flows to the west of Saudi Arabia and then up through Egypt and Turkey and such. But it's mainly Oman, Qatar, Kuwait, Bahrain, those countries. And Qatar especially has decided to discontinue all LNG supply, for example. So this is a huge implication. We've seen price increases for Europe. As always, Europe is going to probably be the one suffering the most. But also India and China are facing concerns from this, especially India, given how much they rely on oil that comes through the Strait of Hormuz. So this is already having implications. And the only way to properly understand how bad it could get, how much it could escalate, is how long the United States wants to prolong this campaign, and how much the Iranians are willing to escalate by taking out certain tankers and what they're capable of. Because as far as I'm concerned, and some others, it's not exactly clear just how and what the Iranians are willing to do. Right now, there's a lot more hot rhetoric than there is necessarily action, apart from what we've seen in the Indian Ocean.
Well, Professor, there have been mixed statements coming in from the United States. On one end, they're talking about the nuclear ambitions by Iran. They say that Iran cannot develop a nuclear weapon. On the other end, they say that a regime change is important for Iran and for the people of Iran. But do you actually think that the United States has a plan for Iran?
It's difficult to know exactly what Trump has in mind sometimes, but I think that, in my opinion, this has been planned for a long time. Obviously, you don't build this amount of assets up in the region unless you plan to do something. And as we found out from some in-depth articles from Western media, this has been planned for years. Most Mossad have been, monitoring security cameras and following the movements of Khamenei's inner circle. So they clearly knew that they were all going to be in the residence, in the palace, whatever it was, when they took it out in those first round of strikes on Saturday. So that obviously is part of the plan. But I think that they decided to move on it at that point because Trump got rather impulsive. He got impatient with the talks and he wanted to offer a decisive blow, right? He got fed up with the diplomatic pathway, and so he decided to pursue the military one. But I think now what we've seen in the past 12 hours, let alone 24 or 48, is a certain reframing of the objectives by the Trump administration. I personally think they are trying to walk back a little bit of regime change, because regime change is nebulous. It's very hard to define. And as we see, the Assembly of Experts, which is this group of clerical individuals who decide the next leader, they are making steps to choosing most likely the son of Khamenei as the new supreme leader. So unless the Israelis and the Americans just continue with this outright until every single senior personnel member, etc., are taken out, this could go on for ages. And I don't think the Gulf states, Saudi Arabia, Emiratis, etc., have that capacity. They're running out of stockpiles. And we have to consider the physical element of this. Of course, Iran doesn't have a limitless supply, but some people tell me they've underestimated how Iran is conducting its strategy. It's different from, say, the 12-day war. And very lastly, I think that, there's a lot of speculation now that sort of Trump might be thinking about arming the Kurdish forces in the northwest of the country to sort of try to incentivize a civil war or uprising, which would be an absolute chaotic situation and definitely like a sort of Trump's version of Afghanistan. So personally, I think they're trying to reframe it to be less about regime change and more about the material, more about the nuclear program, so that they can give themselves an off-ramp that they got rid of the primary regime, they've gutted it, they've undermined it, and they can focus on more limited objectives.
Professor Piotr, thank you very much for all your insights and for talking to us today.
Thank you very much for having me.